Well, tēnā koto katoa. No America ho no te tematanga, ko te taita toku manga, ko waitaki toku awa, ko otatahi toku kainga enai nei, e roia toku tunga mahi o Perryfield Lawyers, ko Stephen mo toku ingoa no reira ngā mihi kia koto katoa. It is really wonderful to welcome so many of you today. I'm glad that you can join us for this little webinar on Sophie and I's our favorite topic, incorporated societies. And we're going to have some fun with it. It's not going to be a boring presentation. We would love to know, as we're going through, what questions do you have? We would welcome the hard questions. We've got a whole bunch of on our website. You may have seen there's an FAQ. I think we're up to about 115 different questions that we've answered and put the answers there. So we would love to have any questions that you've got. Just really brief introductions. My name's Stephen Moe. I'm a partner at Perryfield Lawyers. We're a law firm based from Christchurch, but we are active across the country. I was in Auckland last week. I'm in Wellington tomorrow. So doing a lot of traveling and really supporting people, often purpose-driven or purpose-led businesses and charities. We've got 80 people in our firm, and we do property disputes and corporate commercial, as well as a focus on incorporated societies. I've been practicing as a lawyer since 2001, and despite having an accent, I actually grew up here in Otatahi, Christchurch, went to Canterbury University, worked at a law firm called Russell McVeigh in Wellington, and then worked overseas for a number of years as well. So that's a little bit on me. Sophie, do you want to say who you are?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Sophie, and I work with Stephen here at Perryfield Lawyers, doing a lot of work in this incorporated society space. And yeah, we're here to tell you today about everything you need to know on the new Act, which is really exciting.
Yep, we'll download everything in less than an hour.
Absolutely.
That's our aim. And really, I guess if you come back to why we're doing this, I've honestly lost track of how many of these sessions we've run. I think we're at least 20 now. We try to do them once a month, and we throw in updates that are happening. Like last week, for example, the re-registration period started. So we're going to talk a bit more in this session about re-registration and some of the things that you need to know, whereas previous ones, we haven't gone into all that detail. So you're lucky, you're at the right one. But we would welcome your questions. It will be much more fun for us if we get some interaction. And so the easiest way is with the chat. Just let us know what you're thinking about. I also want to say, because you've signed up, we are about to release this, which is Incorporated Societies Navigating Re-Registration. So that is the new version of our guide, and we're going to be emailing that out to everybody. So a lot of what we say is in here, but also we throw in a lot of other answers to questions and things. So yeah, that's something that you'll be getting in your inbox pretty soon. So the other thing I want to mention is that I know that some of you are, officers of incorporated societies, like you've been tasked maybe with, what does this all mean? What do we do next? So what we want to do is equip you to go back to your committees to be able to tell them what's going on and what's happening. And we're also aware that many of you work as supporters of incorporated societies. So there are accountants on the call, there are financial advisors, there's even other lawyers. And so we're really glad to be able to download what we know to you as well, so that you can feel empowered to go and provide a great service to people. And ultimately, our hope is that we can keep you safe so that you can navigate through the process of re-registering and come out the other side in a, whew, we did it way, maybe in a positive, whew, we did it way. And maybe that's the opening point, is that you could view this as a negative thing. You could say, oh no, there's more red tape, there's more regulation. But our encouragement to you would be, actually, what if you viewed this as an opportunity? What if you viewed this as a chance to make sure that your rules really accurately reflect how you operate? What if you use this as a chance to reinvigorate your membership base and maybe even expand your offerings? Because that's what this is. It's an opportunity. It's a moment in time which will probably never come again. Like, 1908 was a long time ago. They're not going to have another new Incorporated Societies Act and require re-registration. So we'd like to encourage you to think in a positive way. How do we relate to our rules? When was the last time we actually looked at our rules? And also, are we even complying with our rules as they're written? Because I think for a lot of incorporated societies, they're stuck in the bottom drawer gathering dust. And if you go through it, you'll find that there's a lot that needs to be upgraded to make them relevant to today. There's also a challenge there is, should you re-register? Because for some entities, it's actually a question mark. Maybe you started in 1972 with 100 members, and today there's 7 people left. Is it really the best entity type for you? For some of you, you'll say, no, it is. But others, you might actually pause, reflect, say, maybe we shouldn't re-register. Maybe we should transition to a charitable trust. So we'll go into that. And if anybody's interested in that, maybe drop a note in the comments and we can make sure that we dive into more detail. But Sophie, what have we got here? We got some pieces of paper. So the first piece of paper that we like to hold up is from 1895. How many of you were alive in 1895? This is the Unclassified Societies Registration Act. And it's that long, 3 pages. I think there's 18 sections. It's very, very, very short. This was the first type of legislation for what became incorporated societies. So they knew how to do things back in the olden days. 1908 comes along. That's this one. You can see there's a few more pages, but, relatively manageable. There's 37 or so sections. And then we come to Incorporated Societies Act 2022. And you can see a lot more pages. So there's about 270 sections in here. So there is regulations. There's a lot more rules that you need to be aware of. One of the assumptions people make is that this is totally reforming everything to do with incorporated societies. But in fact, what it's doing is what we as lawyers would say is codifying the common law. So things that applied anyway weren't written in the statute, like duties, for example. Now they're written clearly in the statute. So I don't view it as necessarily as big a departure as you might think, even though it's a lot thicker. It's actually going into more detail of things that probably applied anyway. So you'll get the tone is that we're kind of glass half full people. We think that this is an opportunity for you to look at your rules and revisit them. And the other thing that we should say is that it does apply to all 24,000 incorporated societies. So that's whether you're a registered charity or not. I've had many people come up to me and say, I don't know if I'm an incorporated society, and I look into it and it turns out they're a charitable trust. And these changes don't impact charitable trusts unless they registered as an incorporated society, sometimes by mistake. But it should only apply to incorporated societies. And the timing of it, Sophie, do you want to run through what timing are we looking at?
Absolutely. So the re-registration period for under the new act, it actually opened on the 5th of October of this year. As Stephen mentioned, it opened last week and it runs until the 5th of April 2026. So there's no need to panic. There is plenty of time to re-register under the new act. But it is really important that you do re-register, isn't it, Stephen?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, if you don't re-register by the 5th of April 2026, then the society will cease to exist. So it sounds a bit all doom and gloom, but you've got plenty of time to re-register. And one of the goals of today is to sort of talk you through the process of what you need to do and how to impact your society.
Yeah. And you might notice in the chat that there's someone named Sophie. So that is Sophie. And so she's got her laptop here with us. So in the chat, she's going to be posting links to different resources and things that we think might help you. So yeah, but I get a lot of people saying, oh no, I have to adopt new rules like tomorrow because we have to re-register as soon as possible. But actually, it's probably best practice not to rush it and to just get it right rather than doing that. All right. So if you do want to come off of mute, that's fine. Maybe just let me know with a hands up emoji or something, and then I can answer questions as we go. Otherwise, put them in the chat. So what we're going to do is outline to you what we think are the top 10 things that you should know. And the reason that we're doing this is that there has been confusion about how much change there is. So we're just going to run through these. I think we're going to do it the quick version.
Okay.
Because that way we have plenty of time for questions and also to answer any questions about re-registration. So the first point is that new rules are required. So I've already said that, so I don't need to dwell on it. You might say, oh, but we just adopted rules in 2019. Well, even so, the new act sets out different requirements. So I'm willing to take a bet that every single incorporated society will need to re-register. The reason is that Section 26 outlines that you need to cover membership, governance, general meetings, amendment procedures, dispute resolution procedures, name, purposes, winding up. Some of you will have some of that, but you probably won't have all of it. So Sophie's just put in the chat a link to a series of articles that we've done on what you need to have, which we hope is helpful. Number 2.
So thank you, Stephen. The second top 10 change to consider is that a committee is now required under the new act. So this, a lot of you will be doing this in practice, but believe it or not, under the old act, a society didn't need to have a committee. It only needed to have officers. But under the new act, a society must have a committee, which is made up of 3 or more qualified officers. So a committee, it doesn't need to be called that. You might call it the board, you might call it the managing group, whatever you call that particular group, but it's the group of people who are in charge of governing the society, really. And in order to qualify as an officer, a person must be a natural person. They have to be a real human being. They must have consented in writing to becoming an officer. So you can't just hold a vote at a meeting and vote in somebody who's not present. They actually need to consent to becoming an officer of the society. And they also must have certified that they're not disqualified under the new act. So those disqualifications are set out in Section 46, and they're quite similar to disqualifications for, say, directors of companies. Things like they can't be an undischarged bankrupt or have committed certain crimes. But that is one of our top 10 changes, is that you now need to have a committee, which again, it won't be much of a change for a lot of you.
Yeah, the other one that's caused some people to question or wonder is about officers' duties. So there are duties that apply to you as officers. Again, this is an example of you had the duties anyway, now they've been codified. And what the government's really doing is getting the duties to be consistent across different legislation. So if any of you are familiar with the Companies Act, some of these duties will be familiar in that setting or that context. They're just now applying in incorporated societies. So the duty to act in good faith and in the society's best interests, duty to exercise powers for a proper purpose, duty to comply with the act and your constitution. There's a duty of care and a duty not to create substantial risk of serious loss to creditors or incur obligations that it can't perform. So these are now helpfully set out between sections 54 and 61. One of the common misconceptions is that, oh, it's a charity, I don't have duties that apply to me. Sorry to break it to you, but there are duties that apply even if you're doing it from motives of the heart and you're not getting paid. You do need to comply with your duties. So again, I view this as a chance to upskill your governance, use it as a chance to maybe do some online courses or read about it. As a side note, I do a podcast for the Institute of Directors, which is called Board Matters. And I spoke with 13 experienced people in governance, 10 to 15-minute interviews. And so it's a chance to, tell people what is governance. We're about to release season 2. Well, the IOD is. So it's just an example of a free resource. And Sophie's going to drop it in the chat, I think. So yeah, as governance, upgrade your governance, get to the best standard possible. All right, number 4.
Thanks, Stephen. Number 4 is changes to membership. So there have been a few changes to membership under the new Act. Under the old Act, you may be aware that you need 15 members in order to register as an incorporated society. So this has been lowered to 10 members. And under both Acts, if you have another incorporated society or a charitable trust or something similar that is part of your society, then they are still treated as being 3 members for the purpose of determining the number of members. So there's a 10 membership minimum, but under the new Act, this is actually a continuous minimum membership requirement. So your society must always have at least 10 members. This is new, this is different. Under the old Act, you just needed that 15 members in order to register, but now you always need at least 10 members. And the new Act also introduces a requirement for members to consent to becoming a member. So that means you can't just say everybody in the Canterbury district is a member of our society. People actually need to agree to become a member of your society, whatever that looks like for you. And the society also needs to keep a register of members with details such as the name of the member and their last known contact details, and the date that they became a member. And something else that was introduced by the regulations is that you also need to include the names of people who have stopped being a member over the last 7 years and the date that they stopped being a member. So those are a few of the changes to membership. There is a 10-member continuous minimum membership requirement. Then you also need to have that consent and a register of members as well.
Yeah.
Back over to you, Stephen.
Cool. Someone was having trouble joining the Zoom, so I was just emailing with them. All right. And the next one is conflict of interest. So who loves conflict of interest? They come about all the time, and it's not something to be afraid of. The way to solve conflicts is to disclose them. So there's now requirements about what the procedure is if there's a conflict. So to put it simply, I'm an officer. I also run a catering company. I'm going to supply the food for our upcoming event. I'm conflicted. I shouldn't vote on whether my company is chosen to provide the food. Sounds kind of obvious when I say it out loud, but it's not just financial conflicts. What if we're about to employ a general manager for our incorporated society? I contribute to the discussion and they get employed. When they come to the next board meeting, I go up and give them a big hug and a kiss because it's my niece. That's a conflict too. It doesn't have to just be financial. So section 62 to 73 introduce conflict of interest procedures requiring disclosure of when they're interested in matters. If more than half of the committee is interested and can't vote, then you need to call a special general meeting to determine that matter. And I don't think that the person who's conflicted should vote at that meeting as well, because they're conflicted. So we've done a whole article on this. And the other thing is that I meant to say at the start, I see some of you taking notes, which is awesome. It's the best way to learn is to actually take notes, but we will send you the slides for this. And it has all of our speaking notes as well. So don't feel like there's going to be a test at the end of this. It's all written down and we are going to be providing it for you as well to be able to have full information. Number 7.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Number 7 is financial reporting. So there are some new financial reporting requirements under the Act, and this will be different for societies that aren't registered with charity services. So I'll pop a link in the chat to where MB discusses these financial reporting requirements because we're not accountants, so this goes a bit beyond our area of expertise, but they are there and certainly something to be aware of, especially if you're not used to reporting like this, if you're not a registered charity.
Yeah.
I missed one. Sorry, Stephen.
Yep. And then next is dispute resolution procedures. So the new Act requires a society to set out dispute resolution procedures. So we kind of view this as a positive thing because I can't tell you how many times we get the end of we're in a dispute and we're not sure what to do next. So you're now required to have some provision for it. If you don't, then the Constitution will be treated as having the procedures which are set out in the Act. But this is maybe a good point to highlight, is that you can have your own procedures. And there's quite a few times in the Act where it allows you to have your own way of doing things, which I think is quite good because you want to personalize it to how your members would best respond. So just bear that in mind. Schedule 2 of the Act does set out a default procedure, but you could develop your own procedures. We actually worked with our disputes team, and we came up with a whole set of dispute resolution procedures, which we're working with lots of people who want to upgrade their constitutions. So we come in and review their rules, give them feedback and input, and then help them to draft the new rules that will apply. And then we often will put in our dispute resolution procedures, which we obviously think are very good. All right, next one.
Great, thanks, Stephen. The next one is amalgamation. So the Law Commission, when they were looking at the old Act, they noted in their report that it doesn't really have any restructuring options for societies, and it doesn't provide for amalgamation. So in response to this, the new Act does set out some amalgamation provisions. So basically what this means is two societies that are doing quite a similar thing can decide to join together, either one society into the other or both into a new society. So it sets out a simple procedure for this that the societies can follow, and we think it's a great thing to be in the new Act as well. But something worth noting is that unfortunately it doesn't apply until you have re-registered. So we've brought this up with MB because we think it would be great if it applied now for societies before they re-register. But it is a procedure that will be available under the new Act and could be quite helpful, especially with that 10-member minimum that we talked about before. Back over to you, Stephen.
Great, thank you. Keep putting comments in the chat because we will turn to those relatively soon, and we'd love to have any hard questions that you've got for us. The final two, I'm going to do both of those, and then I might get you to share about other options, like why stay as an incorporated society. But before we do that, one of the things that you might notice is that Sophie and I don't use the terminology not-for-profit very much. The reason is that we feel like it's wrong to describe a whole sector with the first word being what it's not. So we're using terminology which we think is framed more positively, which is for purpose, because not isn't the best way to start, and for profit is comparing what we all do by what is profitable. So we're switching the terminology from NFP or not for profit and using for purpose sector. So if you'd like to join that movement, you're welcome to. I've written a little article on that, which I'm pretty sure Sophie is putting in the chat, and it goes into more of the background and detail. So finishing off, number 9 and 10, this really has to do with enforcement and offenses. So it's just to say that now there's rules about how the court can act and enforce decisions, and when the court can make orders. So that's quite helpful if a member applied to the court, what is in the court's power. And offenses have to do with the point I was alluding to before, that actually you do have duties, you do have responsibilities. And it's important to remember that if you fail to do certain things, there are fines, there are potential liability that can result. So, I hope it won't ever apply to any of you because you've come on this, you've learned about it, but it's things like you can't make false statements, fraudulently use property, falsify records or documents, dishonestly incur debt. I hope that none of you ever face this, but just so you know, there are rules about the offenses that apply. So it'd be good if you are aware of timeframes. When do you need to lodge things by? When do you have to notify of changes? The other one that's kind of interesting is that I think it's worth highlighting is that your name needs to have the word incorporated, Inc., or Manatopu in it. So those are important to remember because we've had some clients who want to use a name which doesn't have that ending, and that's not allowed. So you need to remember it has to have incorporated, Inc., or the Te Reo Manatopu. So there you go. Some interesting little developments. Now, Sophie, tell us about charitable trusts or other options.
Absolutely. So one thing that we've noticed is you've got to do some work. You need to update your constitution in order to re-register. So now is actually the perfect time to consider whether or not an incorporated society structure is right for you and your organisation. We've worked with a lot of clients through this process, some of which they may have been set up 50, 60 years ago with a thriving membership. But over time, the membership has waned, and actually what they're really about is their mission or their purpose as opposed to member engagement. So there are some other structure options out there. A incorporated society is an excellent structure. It has a lot of membership engagement, and it's really, really great, really democratic as a model. There's also a charitable trust, which is sort of driven by its mission or its purpose. It's governed by a group of trustees, and it can actually have members too, can't it, Stephen?
Yep.
But it doesn't have to. And did you know that even a company can be registered as a charity? So that's another structure option as well. So now is a great time to consider your structure, and it's something that we go into detail on the guide with an article that Stephen and Craig Fisher have written. So Stephen, do you want to tell us a few stories about some?
I would love to tell you a story. I once got a call. It's so real. I still remember it. So it's Friday, getting late afternoon, early evening. And I get a phone call from the president of an incorporated society, and they say, we've got our AGM tomorrow. Just wanted to give you a heads up that's happening. I'll let you know on Monday how it goes. Hey, great news. We just had 35 people sign up. Isn't that amazing? Monday comes, the president of the incorporated society calls me. It's a different voice. What's gone on? There's essentially been a coup. The new members have voted out the old executive and voted in a new executive. The reason I give you that story is not to scare you, but just to raise the point that democracy can be used for takeovers. And so if your incorporated society sits on assets or has property or could be a target like that, it's worth thinking about whether this model of elections and voting and, potential takeovers is worth continuing, or whether it's worth, I actually think it's incumbent on you all for good governance to consider your options. You might end up saying, no, for us, it's fine. We have, 500 members and they're engaged and they show up and they vote at the AGM. We want to stay. But you might also say to me, well, actually, your other story was kind of true. We started with 200 people and now there's 4 of us left. So anyway, if you do want to transition, it's possible to keep your charity services number when you transition, so you can have some historical link, but it does involve setting up a new entity. So you have to transfer contracts across, you have to have a new IRD number, a bank account number, unless you have a kind bank, although I haven't met anyone who fits that criteria. So you'll probably need a new bank account number. So there is some work involved, but we've helped multiple charities transitioning from incorporated society to charitable trust because of that kind of potential takeover fear. And also just getting tired of elections. Like, let's just have a stable leadership and we just keep moving forward. So we just wanted to mention that as another option. Now, the other thing, we're going to jump into the chat. So if you haven't put your amazing question in yet, I would love to see what it is. We just want to mention that we do have a bunch of resources. So we are trying our best to empower the sector. Our aim is, essentially we want to become the go-to lawyers for every charity in New Zealand. I know that's very ambitious, but why not? We can help. We know that we do really good work. And we are here to provide lots of free information and to resource the sector. So the guide to the Incorporated Societies Act, that's the one that I mentioned before. We're just finalizing that now, this new version. So we'll send that out really soon. We might send you out in the meantime this, which is the first version that we did. We also have this, which is a Charities in New Zealand, a legal handbook, which might be relevant. We have this book, which is Social Enterprises in New Zealand, looking at income streams and diversifying. We also have this book on laying foundations for reimagining business. So those are more businessy side of things. And then for some of you, from religious groups, we have a focus. So there's a Churches in New Zealand legal handbook. So this is just a small sample of the resources. Have a look at our website and you'll see there's a lot of material that generally you'd have to pay to get it, but we just open source it and make it available for everybody. So we're going to jump into the chat. Maybe before we do that, the re-registration, is there anything else that we should tell them? I mean, it's open now. That's the short point, is that last Thursday it started.
Put the link on.
Yeah, do you want to put the link in? And let's see, cost to re-register?
It's free.
Nothing. That's a good price. And you're going to have to supply some key documents and information, aren't you? So you're going to have to confirm that the minimum number of members is changed now. It used to be 15 and now it's going to be 10. So for some of you, maybe the ones I was mentioning that only have 4 or 5 people involved, you might be needing to call your, relatives, but you're going to need to re-register with the minimum number of members. You're going to have to upload your constitution. You're going to have to specify your balance date, your contact details, details of committee members and other officers. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully I'm making it sound relatively straightforward and easy. The key thing is that you have to have your new rules. So that's the bit where we've been, providing input. When you do get your new rules as well, I view it as a chance to take your members on the journey with you. So don't just show up at the AGM and say, here's the rules, pass it. Why not solicit their feedback? Why not get them involved in the process? And why not use this as a chance to reinvigorate your membership base and go out and say, we've just re-registered and we want to take this chance to tell you, the community, about the awesome work that we do. Would you like to join us and become a member? It's a good excuse. Why not? Anything else on re-registration to cover?
It's online, unless you have a reason that you can't submit it online. But Companies Office have tried to make it as straightforward as possible. So I've just flicked the link on the chat to all the details on what you need to know about the process of re-registering.
Great.
So that's there.
Perfect. Now we are recording this, so we'll put it up on our website as well as another resource. Feel free to point other people to that information hub where we've got lots of videos and articles. Chat. What have we got? Have we got any?
We've got some great questions.
We got some great questions. All right. I love it. What are we going to get up to? How many are there?
There's quite a few.
3, 4?
I think there's about 5.
All right.
Which is great. Do members have to pay a fee or subscription? Is the first question. Well,
my view is that it depends what you want to do. You might decide to charge them, and that's very common, but equally you might decide not to.
That's great.
Have you got any other thoughts on that?
I agree. It's entirely up to each society.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about it. Like, cost of living has gone up everywhere, right? Maybe this is a chance or a reason to look at your cost structures and your membership fees as well. Not that I'm advocating increasing prices for everything, but at the same time, if you last set the fee in 1987, it might be a good moment to say, actually, we need, more income. It's the right moment to increase the fees. But yeah, that's my reaction, is that it just depends what you want to do.
Great.
All righty. What's that next one?
Question. There has been some comment, and then brackets, possibly scaremongering, that people won't volunteer for committees under the new legal responsibilities. Can you discuss insurance options to cover these risks?
So that's a great point. My feeling is that the duties that you need to comply with are not that onerous. In other words, if you're negligent, in other words, if you deliberately do something wrong, if you transfer money out of an account, if you commit fraud, you're going to get in trouble. But the vast majority of the duties is centered around the idea that you're acting in the best interest of the society. So I view it, I guess I just view it as this is good governance. If you're not willing to act in the best interest of the society, then yeah, you're going to get into trouble. But hopefully everybody that is asked to be on the committee would have the best interests of the society at heart. So that's my first reaction. The second one is, it's the particular insurance that you're talking about is called directors and officers insurance, sometimes called D&O insurance. And in my experience, it's getting more expensive and it's harder to arrange. So that's just the reality, I guess. The IOD do a guidance note about insurance in New Zealand, which is a free resource, or at least part of it is free. So you can go and have a look at that. But if you wanted to talk to a broker, you could ask them, what is it? Is D&O insurance available? But they may say, no, it's not available, or it's prohibitively expensive. So my best suggestion is keep to the straight and narrow, comply with your duties, educate your governance about the duties. And that way you won't have to have this question about, are we liable or not?
Sounds good.
Next one.
Next one. Can the officers also be members? And if so, are they included in the 10 members?
Do you want to do that one?
I'd love to do this
yeah.
one. The answer is yes, officers can also be members. And actually it's a great point to bring up, because your committee, more than half or more of your committee actually need to be members of your society. So this was subject to a bit of controversy for societies that have a lot of independent officers on their committee. But yes, officers can also be members and they will count towards that 10 membership minimum.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing about membership is that if there's corporate members, they count for 3. So that's just, I think we mentioned that earlier, but it's just good to remember that. So you can have corporate members as well. And I view it as an alignment of purpose. You know, if you're a committee member and you're a member, you're kind of interested in the club and want to see what's happening.
Absolutely.
All right.
What is the benefit of being an incorporated society?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, well, first of all, let's start with basics. It's possible to be an unincorporated society. What am I talking about? It's possible to have a group of people who are what in legal terms is called a society, but they don't exist separately. So what I mean by that is, if you had, say, 20 people, they get together, they have events, they have money that's coming into an account, they are employing someone. That's possible as an unincorporated society. But here's the reason why you would want to be an incorporated society. When that first group goes to enter into a lease or buy a property or sign a contract, who is liable? It's the members of the unincorporated society. So a lot of people don't realize this, but the reason that you would want to incorporate is that you're creating a different legal entity, which then takes the liability. So it's in your best interest to have an incorporated society rather than an unincorporated society. Because then if you enter into a lease, it's your incorporated society that's entering into it, not Steve and Mo, or not Sophie, or not Jane. So it's really important point. Some groups are unincorporated societies, and I would urge you to consider incorporating. Sometimes religious groups stay as unincorporated societies because that's what they want to do from, I guess, a theological perspective, but that's a whole other topic. So we're not going to go there. All right. Is there a process for vetting new members of a society? That's a great question. I don't think we've had that question.
No.
Yeah. So I think once you apply, it's then up to the committee to decide whether to admit you or not. Does the Act actually specify that, though?
No, but it does say that you need to include in your constitution the process for admitting new members. So I guess that would just depend on each society's constitution.
I guess it would be. I mean, I can see the point's a good one. Like, we are a club that exists for this thing, and then this person applies, and we know that they are completely the opposite of whatever, like for some nefarious reason, they're wanting to join our club. We want to not include them. So I guess it comes back to what your rules say, which is a good example of how you can make your rules bespoke for you. So yeah, that would be my answer on that one.
Great.
We got a few more there.
Mhm.
What's that one there? Can paid employees be members? Yes, they can. Actually, this sometimes causes issues because sometimes groups have trouble getting quorum or getting the right number of people to your meetings. And so it might end up being that it's all employees who are there as the members. So there could be some, potential issues, I guess, that come around from the employees being the ones who vote on the officers. But yeah, the short answer is yes, you can. All right. And then is there another
There is
longer one? This is great.
That's a good question.
All right. So there we go. So Chris is here. Hi, Chris. In our situation, we are an umbrella incorporated society, a federation representing approximately 200 member clubs, not members of clubs, most of them whom themselves incorporate societies. Are there any special considerations for umbrella organizations in the act itself? I don't think there are. I think they just treat. Have you come across any that would be specific for like a national, like you don't need to comply with this if you're a national body?
I think there's something around AGM attendance
Right.
for unions, but I'm not too sure.
It'd be quite a specific carve out, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
So I think our short answer to you, Chris, and we're happy to engage offline, is that we don't think that there's a special category of incorporated societies, which is for the groups like yours who do amazing work at a national level with lots of members underneath.
Yeah, what we're going to do is put together packs for our member clubs to give them guidance and to focus on those top 10 issues.
Great.
So, yep.
Oh, that's good. Well, wait a couple days. Not that you're about to do it, but this document is coming out, so it might help them as well. All right, Roger here has a question. Also, if you're applying for grants, normally they won't for registration of incorporated society or charitable trust. Oh, they want registration. Yeah, great point. Thank you, Roger. That's a really excellent point. So the point I was making before about being an entity, if you go for funding, you're more likely to get it from the funders because they say, oh, well, you actually exist. You're a real, thing, rather than a group of 5 people or 20 people or whatever who are unincorporated. So yeah, I don't know. Personally, I find banks are difficult to deal with for any entity type, but I can imagine banks would probably have even more difficulty with unincorporated societies in terms of like, who are you and how do you register? But yeah, thank you, Roger. That was a great comment. All right. Is this one to read out, you think? So we've got a question here or a comment for directors and officers liability insurance, our society. I think the guts of the question is, would D&O insurance protect the committee for decisions made? I think what we might do is engage with you offline on that one, just because it's quite a specific question. But we're happy to do that, which is a great segue. So thank you for that question. I have a commute every day. I live in Otatahi, Christchurch, but I live in Rolleston. So working in Christchurch, living in Rolleston. So I literally have a 25 minute commute. And I know this is shocking to hear that a lawyer would be offering this, but should I listen to the radio or should I talk with someone who's doing some amazing things in the world and needs some guidance? I would rather do the latter. So if any of you do want to reach out, you should have my email in your inbox because you clicked a link to get here. I'm really happy as long as you're willing to talk during my commuting time, which I view as kind of wasted time. I'm really happy just you can shoot me questions like that one or other questions, and then happy to have a conversation, whether or not you need us for legal support in the future or not. Just happy to engage and provide that sort of input. So that is that. All right. Any other ones or?
That's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we haven't covered your question for some reason, or if it's a specific scenario, then just hit reply to the email that Sophie sent or the one that I sent, and we're happy to engage further. So yeah. Oh, thank you, Tracy, for your comment. That's really kind of you to say. We appreciate it. Sophie, is there anything else that we should cover?
I think we've covered everything, Stephen.
I think we've done
in record time.
I think we've done it all. Well, that's good. So yeah, maybe since we have a moment, I will take the chance to tell you, I'm just releasing this little book called The Apple Tree, which is a picture book. And it's on the Seed site if you want to. So that's just a story to encourage people like you. It's about how an apple tree doesn't view its life as having been worthy. But then at the end, there's kind of a, information that you find out. So if you're into books or into encouraging or inspiring stories, then let me know, because I just printed 5,000 copies. So I need to sell them now and get them out into the world. I literally was at home this morning. Sophie was worried, is he going to make it in time? Because I was getting the delivery of 5,000 copies. So I need to start telling people about this resource as well. So yeah. And then the last thing is I do a podcast called Seeds, and I've interviewed about 373 people now about their life stories and journeys. They typically go for an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. The latest is Tatipene Oregon. And so I learned all about his life, and was just an amazing person to talk to. I said to him at the start, I don't want to know about treaty settlements or prime ministers. I want to know about who shaped you to become who you became. So that's what we did for nearly 2 hours, talking with last year's New Zealander of the Year. So it's a resource. We've put it in the chat, how to get to it. It's in podcasting apps and things. And last week we held a conference. There was 475 people who came to the conference, all online, and all of the sessions. There was 95 speakers and 29 sessions. Every single session is about to be released for anybody to watch and listen to. So we might put a link to that when we send a follow-up. So we'll send a follow-up email. We'll include the guide and some information, and also the slides with all of the content. We hope that was helpful. Please let us know if we can provide other support, or if you have other questions you think of. You know how it is. You're going to think of a question 5 minutes later. Just shoot us a note. We would love to continue expanding our list of FAQs. So thank you for everyone attending today, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day, and be watching out for our updated guide. Thanks, everybody. Bye.